What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV, and in this particular video, I want to talk about some developments that have occurred within the Democratic Party over the past several weeks. Some interesting developments, which suggests that President Joe Biden, while it still appears that he will be running for a second term, there are some movements being made within the party because the party leaders are losing faith in President Biden being able to serve a second term, and not only that, being able to defeat Donald Trump in a rematch. So, what kicked this off was on Sunday, a guy by the name of Franklin Fowler, who is the author of a book called The Last Politician: Inside Joe Biden's White House and the Struggle for America's Future, on NBC's Meet the Press said that, quote, "It wouldn't be a total shock if Biden drops out of the presidential race by the end of the year." And the reason for this being that an increasing amount of supporters, Democratic supporters, not just Americans, but Democratic supporters, and those even within the Democratic hierarchy, believe that Joe Biden is simply too old to run for a second term. And not just too old, but really what they're saying is he's too feeble and not up to the job. It's become increasingly, look, I remember when Ronald Reagan, I have some memories of the end of Reagan's term. Now, I was just a kid when he left office. I was just 8 years old, right? But I do remember maybe vividly the last, I say 2 years of his administration, right? I remember him very vividly as far as on television. And one of the things that I saw were comedians making jokes about his age. Now, as I got older, and I began to see and research some of the things they were talking about, falling asleep in meetings, losing his train of thought. You could see a slowdown in his speech pattern, a simplification of his vocabulary, more and more senior moments, forgetting things. Democrats had a field day with Ronald Reagan. Remember? Democrats had a field day convincing you that Ronald Reagan had Alzheimer's. They still do it to today. Tell you, well, he really had Alzheimer's in the White House. He should have been removed via the 25th Amendment. Well, I'm going to tell you something. While it's obvious to me, looking at Ronald Reagan, that there was a slowdown mentally in him, he didn't look a tenth as bad as Joe Biden does right now. All right, Joe Biden. Joe Biden's always been a guy who would make gaffes, but it's not that anymore. He's saying weird shit. He sounds demented sometimes, and he looks feeble. He just looks out of it. Secret Service has to, and his assistants have to sometimes, direct him where the White House is. And he looks disorientated, and and I don't want to bring this up, but this is a guy that had a serious brain hemorrhage. 2 of them, I believe, back in 1988, which caused him to drop out of the race. Now, what I'm saying with this is, he was hospitalized for 6, 7, 8 weeks. So while it didn't have any short-term effects on Joe Biden, you do have to wonder that, coupled with age, it may be having some type of effect on him, right? And not only, and then you look at that, but on top of that, you look at his polling. he's not polling very well right now versus Donald Trump. Now, I think in hypothetical matchups, he's neck and neck with Donald Trump. But you got to remember, when he ran against Donald Trump last time, during the heart of the campaign, he was polling, 5 to as many as 15 points ahead of Trump. Because you got to remember something. Democratic candidates now have the edge when it comes to popular vote, because if you're doing a national poll, right, and not a state-by-state poll, Democrats now tend to have an edge nationally because of the way that votes are distributed. So if a Democratic candidate has a 50% to 48% edge over a GOP candidate, that doesn't necessarily mean the GOP candidate is going to lose. Because you got to remember, when Trump was elected in 2016, he only got 46% of the vote, and when he lost, he got 47%. Biden got 51% last time, but if you just switch about 45,000 or 50,000 votes in 4 states, Trump would have won, even if he had lost by 7 million votes. So the fact that Trump is right there already is disconcerting if you're a Democratic Party member or a Democratic voter. Then the fact that nearly 70% of Democrats are now concerned about Biden's age. 3/4 of Americans are concerned about Biden's age. His polling is very anemic. There's a new poll that came out recently, so this is what drove me to do this video. Plus the comments from that author of that book on Meet the Press. I'll put a link to both in the pinned comment section below. What else did I want to say in this particular video? Well, yeah, there's a lack of enthusiasm for Joe Biden right now when it comes to his campaign. I made this point in 2020. A lot of Biden's votes were not necessarily votes for him, but votes against Trump. By that I mean the motivating factor. It wasn't that people were going out saying, man, I love Biden. I'm going out there and I love me some Biden. They were really more motivated because they were angry at Trump. That was the motivating factor, because Trump was being put on trial, per se, in that election. It was an election where Trump and his administration was up for judgment. And with all the things going on, Trump lost. But now Biden and his administration and his performance are up for judgment. And, a lot of times Americans have this tendency to look at everything in the past with rose-tinted glasses. And for some reason, I think people look at Trump's administration like it was, good times. So I think Trump might benefit from that. And it's interesting that even though Trump is 77 years old himself, while some Americans have some issues with his age, it's not nearly the same. The poll also shows Americans believing that Trump is more mentally sound and is a better leader for America. Go figure. But it doesn't look good for Joe Biden. And then another ominous sign that Joe Biden possibly may be considering dropping out is oftentimes pay attention to who is being promoted or who is all of a sudden making the rounds on political talk shows or political shows in general. You may recall earlier this year, maybe late last year, earlier this year, there was this push for Gavin Newsom, right? And me personally, I don't think Gavin Newsom would win an election against Trump. That's just me. I think he would probably lose. But then again, I have to look at him because I just think he's the epitome of a liberal. So I don't know if he would win. I will say this. If he were to win, it would only be because he would have to pull out an 18 to 20 state strategy, because he wouldn't be a guy that could win 350 plus electoral votes. If Newsom was to win, I think he would have to just sweep the so-called blue states like California, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, Delaware, District of Columbia, Maryland, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Virginia. Virginia, even though we just elected a Republican governor, Virginia to me nationally still swings Democratic. The Northeast. So Newsom could win, but he would. But the thing is, he would have to do very well in like the few swing states we have, which is Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. You know, then he could possibly win. But the reason why I'm bringing up Gavin Newsom is now all of a sudden you're seeing Gavin Newsom being trotted out there. You're also seeing people like Gretchen Whitmer, who's the governor of Michigan. Michigan is a swing state, the state I just mentioned. And the reason why I think that these people are being put out there and making the rounds on talk shows is because the Democratic leadership, and the Young Turks were talking about this, are now kind of having some second thoughts about Biden and Harris. It's getting bad. I mean, they see the polling, and it's not good. You can't have a president poll 36% and a vice president polling 34, 35% and realistically think you're going to win an election. Now, look, the election is still over a year from now, but you got to get kind of realistic now. All right? You kind of got to get realistic. So there is a chance that Joe Biden possibly may be kind of pressured by the Democratic Party. If his polling doesn't improve, he may be pressured to stand down. Because you got to think about it. It's not just about Biden. Biden is the head of the party, and he's at the top of the ticket potentially. So if Biden is not nationally popular, he may hurt other candidates down ballot. So at the end of the day, who knows? Who knows? And also, another good point that I heard and I agree with is that we all know the mainstream media skews left. And many of the people that are in the mainstream media have ties to the Democratic Party. And we all know this. These are points that have been brought up time and time again by former Republican leaders like Richard Nixon. I know he's not popular, he wasn't very popular, but he was truthful about that, and I agree. And Trump brings it up all the time. So look, at the end of the day, yeah, I do think that Joe Biden possibly, emphasize possibly, may consider dropping out, which would be seismic. But anyway, tell me what you guys think.